Dear listeners of the Female Guides Requested podcast, happy Wednesday. This is your host Ting Ting from Las Vegas, and welcome back to another episode of the Everything SPI series. Today, Spencer and I will be discussing the important topic of teaching and curriculum design. Both Spencer and I are thrilled about this episode. We'll start by discussing the types of courses that can be taught utilizing single-pitch terrain. Then we will dive into our guiding principles, rack and fire. We'll use a case study to explore the F in fire, which stands for Formulate, in detail. Both Spencer and I are AMGA certified rock guides and SPI providers. We co-taught an SPI course back in October 2023 and found that our teaching style was quite compatible and complementary. Therefore, we decided to do this podcast series, Everything SPI, to create supplemental material related to the SPI programs. Spencer and I both have deep roots in climbing education. We have over 20 years of field instructing experience and are confident that we can provide valuable insights. We also recognize that the field of climbing instruction is dynamic and we can't possibly know everything. So, if you have any questions, feedback, please reach out to help us improve. Now, please enjoy. Hello, Spencer. Welcome back to the SPI series, Everything SPI with Ting Ting and Spencer. I'm excited because right now, October, it's almost November, we both are busy. It's like a busy season.
It's guiding season.
Yeah, but you know what? Somehow that I got feedback for the SPI episodes because people do listen to them. So I'm like pretty excited.
Me too.
Yeah, and they student just gave me a feedback, just like they really looking forward to this particular episode that we are trying to put out because I told them we are gonna have this one, and it's about teaching. And teaching is hard.
Yes, but it's what we're here for.
It's also pretty rewarding, right?
Absolutely.
And we are always constantly refining our craft.
Yeah. And
Spencer and I have a lot of teaching experience. And let me just tell you, I wasn't super proud by my first course that I delivered. But right now I'm pretty proud of things I teach. So we actually, this outline took forever for Spencer and I put it all together. But I think this can help our SPI students or potential maybe fellow guides, and if they feel that they need a fresh perspective to improve their teaching. So that's because we like to look at notes. And because this is an Everything SPI episode, so we are going to focus on what we can do in SPI terrain. So SPI terrain for a lot of people, that's basic means you can have intermediate anchor, and that's a single pitch terrain. But we do use single pitch terrain to teach a lot of things. So, what do you use single pitch terrain to teach?
Everything.
Everything.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think that honestly, single pitch terrain is like the perfect environment to work on the beginning stages of any skill, right?
For sure.
So whether that's intro to outdoors or, if you're learning to lead or you're learning to do, lead trad, build trad anchors, even multi-pitch climbing, a lot of times we would find that craft in a single pitch setting, and that's where that starts. Typically starts on the ground, right?
Definitely.
And we can use a single pitch setting to sort of replicate multi-pitch, right? We're in like a lower consequence environment. Self-rescue too. So, I mean, and big wall, it's all the things. Everything we can use a single pitch terrain to teach. And I think it's the terrain that even the more advanced and longer courses that we teach starts in. So
definitely. And I like that when you just said, you mentioned, well, you start at a lower consequence terrain, right? So we all know that risk management is our ultimatum, and so that's why I just like, I want to do ground school, right? But obviously ground school is not as exciting as like vertical terrain. But it's definitely is like a good place to start because it's super low consequence. But then the next level up, obviously, is like single pitch terrain, and then we can always use, I don't know, fixed line or top row setup to keep manage the risk. And then when we feel like the time is mature, then we can gradually give students more freedom. Yeah. Another thing I also teach on single pitch terrain is like movement coaching, I think.
Yes.
Right? So I know that, we both are pretty strong on systems, so that's why we talk a lot about all those very technical skills. But obviously, practice falling, right? Like, I think this is somehow it's kind of hip nowadays. Just
practicing falling.
Yeah, just like your mental.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And then also, maybe like red point tactics and movement. Like, I know both of us teach crack climbing skills.
How to climb slab.
Right.
How to mantle.
Oh, exactly.
Right.
All that, those things. So don't feel that, wow, single pitch terrain is actually quite a useful terrain for a lot of people to develop their skills.
Yeah, I hope SPIs feel empowered to empowered by that statement or by those ideas, right? Like, yes, single pitch terrain, we're mostly guiding without intermediate anchors, but wow, it is such powerful terrain. It's so useful.
Definitely.
So, the sky's the limit in terms of how you can utilize that environment.
Yeah, and a lot of students think that, SPI students think, I'm going to take beginner out. Yes, maybe at the very beginning. But I'll just like, look, I'm teaching you a SPI course in a single pitch terrain.
Yeah.
Yeah, and which is a very advanced skills.
Yeah, of course.
And totally. And then next one is like, we are trying to introduce, this model we developed. So we have this guiding principles, and then we also have this model to help you to design your course. So the guiding principle that we developed, we think these acronyms are really cool.
Well, there's a lot of them, so I'm hesitant for them for that reason, but
I want to put it out there, and then so people can use it if they feel like it's pretty useful.
Definitely.
So I would say a lot of time when I think about my course back and forth, I use this guiding principle called RACK.
Yeah.
RACK, which is probably familiar with like people track climb. Obviously, they have a rack. So obviously the R is risk management. So we've been talking about risk management. We can overlook risk management, and then when we design course, then people is gonna learn new skills, and I kind of need them to make mistakes. Because mistakes, I think, are the best teacher. But I just can't afford for them to make critical mistakes.
Definitely.
Right? So we need to design these things so they can feel like they are in the environment. They can make mistakes. And A is my neighbor dogs want to participate in this podcast too.
It's good, valuable input.
Yeah, and A is ask questions.
Yeah.
And I personally actually learned this doing this podcast.
Okay.
And I found that if you ask the right questions, people just open up. And so a lot of time when I feel like, this course doesn't seem to like go as well as I want it to be, I just like, I start just ask myself questions. Just like, and then I think that's the first step of like troubleshoot. Just try to see whether you can ask questions, and eventually you know how to ask the right question.
Yeah.
Because when you find that, ask the right question, then answer is just right. Yeah. And then C, I would say, is to collect info. Because when we interact, and now obviously when we prepare for the course, I probably need to study, right? And then when we interact with our students, I want to know their previous experience, what they want. And then also when I interact with them, I just keep observing them and collect information that can help me to refine or maybe pivot my course. And then K is keep it simple. And I found it very important for two things. I really like the system to be simple because it's very easy to troubleshoot. If something just like, oh, wow, it doesn't look right, then if the system is very simple, it doesn't look right, it probably means something you have to change. And then also when the course is pretty simple, I feel the retention rate is pretty high.
Definitely.
Yeah. And then and when we design a course and we use this model, I'll let Spencer talk about the model that we use, this next acronym that we have.
Oh, yeah. So, so the next acronym, the guiding principle that's next is I'll just pull back the veil. It's FIRE.
FIRE, yes.
And so, I mean, the structure, so FIRE is born out of this idea. We're trying to come up with a strategy for curriculum design, right? If our goal is to design curriculum, then what are the different aspects? What are the things that go into that? And I mean, we feel like FIRE is a diverse and applicable to a number of different settings, right? And it's useful on a broad scale. So if you're trying to plan a course of whatever length, then you can use these guiding principles within FIRE to slowly come up with your course, and not just come up with your program, but also like refine it over a period of time and slowly improve it. So FIRE, F stands for Formulate, and so you can think about that as like your sort of initiation phase of your course. You're thinking about the planning process. And then I is Implement. So typically that means we're actually out there doing the work. That's our guided day. We're actually out there using RAC, of course, but implementing our plan that we formulated in the first step, doing the actual guiding. And then we reflect. And of course we use reflection along the way, right? We're gathering information and we're reflecting on what we are learning along the way, but also we want to make sure we reflect back on the program afterwards, and we really consider whether or not we met our outcomes, we achieved our goals, and ask ourselves the right questions based on, the success of the program. And then we enhance. So we kind of start the process back over. We go back to square one and we refine, we enhance our program. And so there you go. That's the whole process to curriculum design and development.
Nice. Yeah. And I found that even though we created this acronym for the curriculum design, but once we did that, I found that actually my daily life, I use FIRE to kind of like, if I have a particular goal or a particular project, I find it very useful.
For sure.
So, and so of course, formulate, implement, reflect, and enhance. And actually, the implement and reflect and enhance is kind of like keep going until you keep refining until you're like, wow, this is such a good product.
Yeah.
Right? So now I feel like I have an almost finished product. Now the process is over. You send.
Yeah. You dial it in,
right?
You get the beta,
right?
And fire it.
Totally. And and I found that from students' feedback from my experience of teaching SPI and also running SPI assessment, I found that teaching is just hard, and Spencer and I are hoping that we can create some sort of mentorship model, because 3-day course is very hard for us to kind of help students keep improving on their teaching art. And hopefully we will develop this model, and hopefully we'll release our model and class next spring. So stay tuned for that, and of course sign up for that thing once you see that release.
Yeah.
But now, of course, we jump back. So to start with our FIRE model. And then we'll talk about the principles, and we are going to use a very typical day that maybe most of the instructor will start.
Yeah.
So what's the case study we want to use, Spencer?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, FIRE is applicable for any sort of day that you might find yourself facilitating. And a common one is just folks' first time outside.
Right.
I've been pretty focused heavily on like intro to outdoor programs, so folks who are maybe trying to transition from like a gym setting to outside.
Okay.
But yeah, which one do you want to focus on?
I mean, that's totally great. I have to say that I haven't taught beginner class for a long time.
Yeah, for sure.
But I would actually love to, because I think that's would be very applicable and very useful for 2-hour SPI students.
Okay, cool.
Right? Because I think when I just started, I definitely took a lot of beginners outside. So I think that will be a good, cool case study.
Yeah, well, so maybe I can set the stage for the programs a little bit. Yeah, so I mean, I guess the story I've been telling for these programs is, I think back to when I first started climbing, and my goal was to climb outside a bunch. I didn't have all of the skills and abilities to do it on my own, and so I was typically going out with folks who were a little bit more skilled than me, a little bit more advanced than me. But my early intro exposure to outdoors was figuring out how to play this support role, right? And so that's maybe, a goal or an early objective that you think about, like what's the objective or the outcome of the course, right? And for me, for my intro to outdoors program, it's to be able to play a support role when I'm outside to my climbing partners that are more advanced than me, and maybe they're the ones actually putting the rope up, right?
Great. Yeah. That kind of made me remind me one thing that. Because I give students all this like curriculum design practice. Yeah. And then, of course, we will say, hey, you have 8-hour day. What's your goal for this particular course? What do you want student to take away? And then, of course, people just say, I want them to be able to type figure 8. I want them to be able to belay. Yeah. And a lot of times they will think about a lot of goals. And I was just like, those are all good, but I like the setting that you have, because I really like that at the end of the course, because climbing is an ever progressing process, right? So if somehow I give my student certain tool, and then this tool they feel very confident, and they can go out to find like-minded people to do it together, then they can start to accumulate experience.
Sure.
Yeah. So I found that, because like us, right, we take beginner course, we accumulate, and then we can take intermediate course. So I found that be able to have tool to accumulate experience is very important.
For sure.
So that supporting role, just like, wow, if you are a bomber, we're very good, safe belayers, and people are like willing to climb with you. So then you can get more pictures in.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and so, I mean, I think where Formulate starts when we think about curriculum planning is considering like specifically who our students are, and then thinking about the course goals, course objectives, course outcomes. And so to put that back into the perspective of like an intro to outdoor day, for me, my story was, okay, like I'm a climber who, like I've been working on movement, I've got some exposure to climbing. I know what it is, right? It's not my first time ever seeing ropes or climbing on ropes. So I thought about like who the demographic is, right? I'm considering who am I going to be teaching this day. And then I'm also thinking about like what are the goals and objectives. And I think what seems useful to me is to create a picture of what the days look like that the people who you're teaching will be operating in after the program, right?
Right.
And so that's what my program's built around, this Intro to Outdoors programs. Like what situations are people going to be in after this course, right? And I'm trying to give them some skills to be able to operate in that situation.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we have this outline, and I'll put this outline into our episode show notes. Yeah. So you don't have like, right now you don't have to take your notebook to jot it down.
Yeah.
So I really like that course goal setting, and then I like that, after this, they are going out on their own. What are they going to do?
Right.
So then you can help them to feel like they are more confident in that situation. Yeah. Great. Yeah. So your setting is also, our example is gym climbers. So maybe the first thing that we write down here is who are the students, ratio, prerequisites. So in your particular setting, do you have any answers for this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Totally, yeah. So, I mean, I guess for this program specifically that I'm describing, or one that I've been working on a lot lately, it is gym climbers.
So they already exposed to climbing.
Yeah.
Yes.
But that's not always the case. I mean, sometimes it's folks who have some experience climbing outside. But I think the onus is on you as the facilitator to figure out where they're at beforehand.
Yeah.
That's kind of like the first stage. But yeah, I mean, for our example here, I guess we can say, sure, yeah, they're gym climbers. There's some folks who are climbing in the gym a little bit.
Right.
Maybe they're leading, maybe they're not.
Okay.
But they haven't necessarily made that leap to leading outside yet.
I see.
Yeah.
Right. So, and then obviously, right now, the core settings here, you can say your core settings to anybody who wants to experience climbing too.
Yeah.
But right now, it's focused on just like, people who has been exposed to climbing in the gym.
Yeah, you could imagine you come up with a course or a program where there are some prerequisites for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So the prerequisites seems like they have climbed before. Okay.
Sure.
Great. And how about like ratio? Like for example, beginners, right? How many people do you feel comfortable taking out?
Well, I mean, I think now more.
Of course, yes.
Or early on, it was probably fewer, and I think that that's probably a good strategy for developing SPIs is to think about keeping their ratio small.
Right.
But I'd also think about what's the number you need for your students to like really have a successful program, So I think what's really beneficial for this program is to have at least 2 people, right?
Okay.
And then
you work as a team, instructor team. Okay.
Yeah, and so like maybe I as the facilitator am there guiding this process of like what does it look like for the 2 of you to be trying to go climb outside together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously when we think about ratio, right?
Yeah.
So it depends, right? So it could depend on like how comfortable you feel like you can manage,
Sure.
and then you can deliver a strong course and also manage the risk.
Yeah,
right?
And I guess I should also say you're not always going to be able to control the ratio, right?
Oh, okay.
Maybe a certain number of people is going to come to you and just say, hey, I want to do this program.
But you probably should have an upper limit, right?
Sure, you should definitely have an upper limit.
Right.
I think my point is that you should be thinking about how the ratio impacts your program.
Okay.
So when you start to formulate your program,
right.
How does the ratio impact ultimately what you're going to teach or how exactly you teach it?
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
6-to-1 is the masked ratio for SPIs.
Yeah, true, but definitely we talk about in some areas, so if you have 2 instructors, you probably can only take up 10 students because they want the group size to be less than 12.
For sure.
But depends. It really depends on the areas.
Yeah.
But to be honest though, that's a lot of people.
It's a lot. Yeah, 6 people to manage for 1 SPI is a lot. And certainly we can talk about at some point strategies for managing more people. But I think what's important for SPIs to remember is that your risk management job is easier at smaller ratio.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then, of course, when we just starting out, just like, too many people probably out of our capacity.
Yeah.
But now, obviously, we both have confidence that we can manage a little bit more people. Great. And then the second thing on our outline, we talk about course goal, objective, outcome. And we also put down the set priorities here. So, and then of course we actually, before we even jump into this outline, we talk about the course goals. And then maybe, let's see, that's our kind of like big picture course goal.
Totally.
Yeah. So during this course, you can have like smaller goals too. And it's kind of nice to have them.
Definitely.
Right? So it just kind of help you to formulate your course. So what do you think are the common goals or good goals to help you accomplish the big goal so they can go out and be a good supportive role?
Yeah, so there's the broader picture goal of being a supportive role, but I think that there's really 2 skills I would think that most folks would want to focus on, and I expand that maybe to 3. But really my goals are to in an intro to outdoor setting, if I'm trying to be in a supportive role for somebody else new to the outdoors, are to lead belay well and to clean anchors well, right?
Yes.
And I think cleaning anchors well that requires maybe a little bit of an exposure as to what an anchor is. So that's maybe a separate goal or a side goal or a byproduct of that goal of cleaning anchors is some anchor familiarity. Yeah. And so I think those are the three I focus on in that program. And of course, like actually learning to lead itself could be a goal. It depends sort of on what the people who are taking the course want.
Right.
But in my vision, right, I'm going outside with somebody who's more experienced than me. I'm going to give them a lead belay. They're going to get up to the top, maybe build the anchor. I'll lower them down. And then if it's my turn to climb, it would be really efficient if us as a party, if I could clean the anchor,
right,
and then come down and then we move to the next route, right? So I don't necessarily need to know how to lead belay lead climb to play a really supportive role in that sort of intro to outdoor setting.
And then with those things, then you can feel useful in your group, and then you can start getting some pitches in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can get some pitches in, and without, I don't know, not that it's an issue to slow the group down, but you get more pitches in, right? If you can move efficiently throughout the day.
Right. So, yeah. So great. Yeah. So I definitely think cleaning anchor is like a good skill to have. Yeah. I mean, lead belay is a little bit hard.
It's hard. Yeah, I mean, it's some preliminary knowledge there, I think, is probably is at least a good focus. An advanced lead belay, right? Maybe that's could be ulterior to that.
Definitely.
But depends on how much time you have in the program.
And then, of course, right, so we were talking about lead belay. I mean, right now I can say I'm a good lead belayer, but when I just start out, I just make sure that I don't kill anybody, right? So definitely it's like level 1 and level 2, we need to get the ground covered.
Yeah.
So maybe, on that, this course, say we only have an 8-hour day, we just focus on really just like get the ground covered so nobody get hurt. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, it can be simple lead belay. Lead belay level 1, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And then obviously you saying like, well, if the student's doing really well, right, of course we can teach them more skills. And then here I was talking about, I know a lot of new instructor. I mean, I was like that instructor when I was new, just like, I want to teach them everything. and it's good because, when students want to learn, you want to teach them everything. But I certainly feel like it would be good to set priority for those goals. So at least you can have an organized way, and then that you have time to really see them can independently perform those skills under your supervision. Yeah. So at least you don't give them too much information. They go out just like, what should I do now? So
I resonate to that for sure. I mean, I think early on my focus was, in a lot of these programs I taught, was to just try to cram as much curriculum in as possible. For sure. Like, I just got to get the information delivered.
Yeah, nowadays they can watch YouTube.
But you think back to Ting Ting's keep it simple, right?
It is, yeah.
That's a huge priority. And I think the thing I had to learn the hard way was that folks can't necessarily retain all of the information that you give them.
No.
Right? And so what's most important is to set a priority of what do you actually want them to remember, and then let's mostly just focus on that.
Yes. And then those things have to be good.
Yeah.
Yes.
For sure.
Yeah. Great. All right. Now come down to next. We're gonna structure, visualize the day, and prepare lesson plan. Whoa, lessons. Yeah. And so obviously, I would encourage people, right? So for example, you take gym climbers out. Hopefully, not hopefully, I should be able to tie figure 8 now, and then probably top row belay. Right? But definitely check on that too, for sure. And then you will have maybe like cleaning anchor or lead belay. You said the 2 most important things we want to focus on. And then other things. So all these things is kind of mini classes.
Totally.
Yeah. So you will prepare how you're gonna teach them. Yeah. And then I would say that the more you prepare, probably the better. If you have not yet taught any similar courses. Yeah. And all right. So under that big category have A, B, C, D. And
yeah.
All right. So the first thing we wrote down progression and regression.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah. So I mean, we're into the nitty gritty here. We're like actually trying to build our lesson plan for the whole entire day.
Yes.
And I think we just want to make sure that we have flexibility to scale up or scale down depending on where our people are at, right? And so you talked about how, there's sort of these baseline level of SPI skills you're going to have to be considered of every single time you go out, right? People are going to need to know how to tie a figure eight follow through if they're going to try to learn how to clean an anchor, right? That's a skill they should already have.
Yes.
And so you just have to get out there. And once we're out there, we need to figure out, or I guess in our planning phase, we need to be conscious of the fact that if folks aren't actually at those prerequisites, how do we fill those in? Right? How do we scale back the day depending on where folks are actually at? So you can kind of be thinking about in advance, what are the other mini lessons I need to plan for if I need to regress this greater structure? Or you get there and they kind of already have seen how to clean an anchor before. Right? Okay, well, how do I scale this up? What do I need to be thinking about? What lessons can I have in my back pocket if I need to give more information than I thought I did before?
Yeah. So for example, so maybe just use anchor cleaning as an example. Right? So maybe, let's just say we check their figure eight tie in. They're good. Okay, their top row belay, good. All right, so they can top row to the top.
Great.
And then, but then if you never see like an anchor.
Yeah, you've just been climbing in the gym, maybe.
Right. So just like you said, and then now what kind of anchor should I see?
Yeah.
What do you even mean by cleaning anchor, right? So that's you were talking about the familiarity, right? So then we probably have to scale down, just like, now we need to introduce jargon to them. What exactly anchor can consist of.
For sure, yeah. Right. And, why are we cleaning it? Why do we need to bring Windex and my towel up to the top? It looks pretty clean to me. I don't know.
Right. So definitely, I also tell my students that when you talk about jargon, be careful, right? Sure. Because use common language. So then don't just throw it out, because we talk like these jargon like daily, regular vocabulary.
Definitely.
Yeah. And then so, for example, probably like scale up, right? So for example, people might, for example, all the climbing area, they have masses, right?
Yeah.
So anchor cleaning is kind of simple, but now they have to do like chains or rings, and then now it's kind of like, okay, now they just say, I know how to clean masses. Right. Then we can scale up.
You say, okay, great. Check, box checked.
Right.
Like, what are the other situations these people might find themselves in?
Totally.
Rings? Are they going to be chains? Beyond that, are they going to have to rappel for some reason?
That's right. Yeah. Definitely, right?
Yeah.
So what kind of situation you choose to repel?
Yeah.
Yes. So you definitely need to make sure that they already have all this base skill, because I've seen some teaching, because my students teach anchor building, they already talk everything, just like, sometimes get out there, you might want to repel, you might want to get lowered, but then there's just so much information.
Yeah, we're lost in the sauce.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's kind of nice that just like, and then maybe the students start to have this blank stare, and that's like your cue.
Yeah.
Right. Because I think sometimes the students might not necessarily ask you questions like, what does that mean and stuff, and then they just like, okay, there's a lot of information I need to absorb, but then maybe it's a time to scale down a little bit.
Yeah, I think the key is to go back to rack, right?
Yes.
So, we want to have all these ideas in our back pocket, but when we're actually out there implementing, we need to be asking the right questions. Hey, have you ever seen an anchor before? Do you know what an anchor is? Right?
Yes.
Do you know what I mean when I say that? Do you know what I mean when I say cleaning anchors?
Right. Yeah. And you'll be surprised that you just assume that they know.
Yeah. You make assumptions and you don't actually meet their needs, right?
Yes.
Either because you explain things that they already know, or because you're explaining things that they're not ready for.
Yeah. And then sometimes I found that this progression and regression, I actually do a lot of practice on that.
Yeah.
When I teach like more some complex topics, I really just like can I just break it down a little bit more? And then if they are like shiny eyes, it's like, wow, this is totally makes sense. Then I give them more information, right? But if they are just like, oh, all right.
Yeah. And you have to consider your audience. If you have an audience that your participants have literally only ever climbed in the gym, you're going to probably have to start from a very fundamental level.
For sure.
Just so they even understand what it is you're talking about.
Definitely.
Great. Okay.
And then, all right, the next one, we're talking about divide and conquer.
Yep.
Break the whole course into different sessions and classes. Oh my God. Utilize overlaps. Okay, so people practice new skill based on the foundations of learned skills. Great. What does it even mean?
Oh man, there's a lot there. I mean, but super important. Yeah.
Yes.
So, I mean, we have this overall plan for the day, but like, what exactly is going to happen when we get out there, and how do we actually split up these mini lessons throughout the day?
Definitely.
Right?
Yes.
So we can talk about our example, Intro to Outdoors. I mean, we get out there, and the first thing we have to do is obviously get our ropes set up.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then, the mini lessons. So if getting the rope set up means we have to lead, maybe that's what we start with, is lead belay. They're going to learn a little bit of a fundamental lead belay lesson.
Right. Yes.
I have to kind of go into those details. And I think when I think about these mini lessons, so we're trying to cater to multiple different learning preferences, right? Usually these lessons the mini lessons start with me, or for me, with a demo, right? And I'm demoing using audio and visual, right? Skills. So I'm showing them, I'm talking to them about what they might have to do. And that's kind of typically the first stage for those mini lessons for me.
Yes.
And hopefully that's a dynamic delivery. It's engaging, right? There's ways we can draw them into that process. But really, I think the most engaging part, and where a lot of the learning happens for these hands-on technical skills, is guided practice.
Right.
So we break into the kinesthetic piece, right?
Yes.
We do our demo, and then we jump into guided practice. And we actually focus on, skipping ahead here a little bit, but we jump in, we do some hands-on practice. And my goal for those lessons typically is to not ever talk. Like, ideally, I could just talk for 5 minutes. I find folks start to lose attention at 5 minutes. Has that been your experience?
I don't know. Maybe depends on. It depends on a lot of factors. But when people come outside, though, there's a lot of cool things outside. Yeah. So it's not that they don't want to listen to you, but there's just a lot of more interesting things outside. So you're competing with like the birds, the sound, the beautiful scenery, and all that. And then people are like pretty. They want to move. They want
to do stuff. Yeah,
right,
they want to be hands-on. And honestly, that's where most of the valuable learning happens.
Definitely.
So if we can limit our lessons to 5 minutes, I think we're doing them a favor, right? Yeah. We're really doing a better service there.
And then that's why that we like to be backtrack a little bit. That's why we like to break in our class. Just like, wow, it is a very big topic even, but we are trying to break down into small pieces.
Totally.
And then I like, the thing you were talking about here. I know that it's a little bit hard to just like say like one item at a time, but
isolate those,
yes, but I like that you would. Here we're talking about utilize overlaps, right? Because it's just like, okay, every skill is built on the previous skill you just practiced.
Yeah.
Maybe like back to like anchor cleaning, right? So we say back to like risk management, right? So we usually start with the ground school.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So ground school, a lot of people, is common approach. People bring a boat board. That would be exactly the same thing that you would see on the top.
Yeah.
Right. So then they would do that on the ground, and then when they move onto the top, and obviously, I never let them just independent do it. I would be always right next to them.
Right.
So we only add one new thing is they are now on away from the ground, but the setting is exactly the same.
For sure.
So, because when you are like high off the ground, you're nervous, right? So I'm just like, hey, look, anything that's risks involved, don't push too far. And then so when you have overlap, so they can have something they already feel familiar with.
For sure.
And then with you also like right next to Dan, so they can focus on, okay, now I'm high off the ground, but these things I've seen it multiple times.
Yeah.
And then I can do that.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like we as instructors, we as the facilitators have to think about how do we set our students up for success, right?
Yes.
And I think that starts by creating these environments that we keep the big picture, but we're really just focused on this one skill. We're standing here on the ground. We're just focused on how to clean anchors when you get to these 2 bolts.
Definitely.
And then we're going to reinforce that by building that into another lesson or another drill later.
Yes.
Potentially.
So so every step up, there'll be one new component, but not too many.
Yeah.
So then at least they have some familiarity with things they have already practiced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I try to take whatever my highest priority is, right? So if my priority for the day is cleaning anchors, that's like the first key skill. And that's the one that we're going to hopefully do over and over and over again throughout the day, so that I've prioritized that. Right. And there's going to be real retention there, hopefully.
And then with this step by step with overlap thing, and since you break into that small component, we have this outline here, just like you can just like see them, you just tell them the whole thing, right? You actually can evaluate them in every single step.
Totally.
So just like, oh yes, now I'm ready to move on. Oh no, I'm not ready to move on, right? And then so it will also not be overwhelming, because if you give them all the information, and then they just like, oh, what's your first step, and then you will discover that every time you just have to tell them the step 1, step 2, and step 3, and then just like, ooh, then why don't you just focus on step 1,
right,
and then step 1.5, and then step 2, and then so this way that they can really build their progression and confidence.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's more there. Oh,
okay,
man.
Great. Yeah, go ahead.
I think I'm thinking about, like the first stage to cleaning an anchor often is tethering in, right?
Yes.
And so, a mini lesson I'm often doing before we even get to cleaning anchors is just talking about different tethers.
Yes.
Like that's a 5-minute lesson on itself, right?
Yeah.
But maybe people don't even know what different materials exist for tethers, right? Or different type of carabiners that potentially exist in the world. Right. So there's another mini lesson potentially that we're utilizing. And for every one of those mini lessons, I'm thinking about, splitting them out, isolating them, but eventually, hopefully, putting them into a bigger drill so that there's repetition and that there's retention of knowledge. Yeah. But I'm trying to cater to all 3, like learning preferences, audio, visual, kinesthetic. Yes. And I'm also trying to give dynamic delivery and limit my speaking time, because hands-on practice is the key.
It's variable.
Yeah.
And then that reminds me something you were saying, that just like anchor you in. And we all know that. So sometimes I might just keep it simple. Just like, this is the thing I'm going to anchor myself in. And that's the only thing I teach. Yeah. Because later, if people are all like, wow, we got this anchor cleaning really well, then I can talk about that.
Right.
And that lesson, I think, can wait, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And then another thing I found that, so sometimes, well, you're not necessarily anchoring in, because there's different way to cleaning anchor, right? But I found that don't introduce too many variations.
Totally.
Maybe at the very beginning, just teach them one way will always work.
Yeah, or will work for the majority of settings.
Yes.
Yeah. Ultimately, what you decide to do specifically is somewhat up to you and is dependent on the context and stuff like that. But I think there's value in potentially keeping it simple.
So I just like, well, if they are like super nervous, I just like, look, I'm going to teach you one way. Yeah. It works for every single situation, right? But then if they are so dialed, and I can start to introduce the variation. Yeah. And then start to encourage independent thinking, because I ultimately really want everybody to think independent for their own.
Totally.
But for new people, though, it's like it's like a huge task.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that well, there's multiple ways to keep it simple.
Right.
I think there's different anchor cleaning processes specifically, that some of which are simpler than others. And typically I've found that the more complex ones build on the simpler ones.
For sure.
So ultimately what you decide to come up with is based on a number of factors, or what you decide to teach is based on a number of factors, but definitely keep it simple. Pick one way and try to stick to that.
Yeah.
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 And try to see mastery in that first before you move on, or before you introduce new variables. Yeah.
Definitely. It's just like, for cleaning anchor, we were talking about, sometimes you repel and sometimes you get lowered. I was just like, for the majority of the time you get lowered.
Yeah.
Let's just focus on
Let's just make that a baseline.
Exactly. Yeah. So I know that you really want to tell people when they need to repel.
Yeah.
But let's get the majority things down, and then when they are so down, then they have room to absorb new information, I think.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to think beyond yourself in these situations.
Because you know them. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like you want to show your skills, you want to show what you're capable of teaching. But
Yes.
we have to think about our audience and what's good for them.
Right. Yeah. And then so the last thing under this outline is like time management, right? So it's actually I think it's over. This time management can't cover everything. Just like, obviously depends on your students, right? So, all right now, doesn't seem like they can get, like in this one day, I just don't have time to go through all this, 10 different type of scenarios, right? So then come back to what's the most important thing, right? So just drill this time, just like, then at least today, I'm confident they walk out this way. They're not going to kill themselves.
Right, yeah, if they try to replicate this.
Right, yeah. And then they can always come back for more class.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Great. Cool. Let me see. Anything else we want to add on this thing?
Oh, I mean, that like structure, visualization, write and prepare lesson plans. I mean, like, ideally that's something you lay out formally.
Yes.
Right? Our hope is that you're actually writing out the day with a time plan.
Definitely.
And you're putting different mini lessons into that overall structure.
Yeah.
And that will help you really think about exactly how the flow of the day is going to go.
Definitely.
But there's a lot of work to do there. You know, you've got to build that broader structure, but you also have to be mastering those mini lessons along the way to give an effective lesson. But these are great first steps.
Yes, and I would say that don't feel it's a daunting task. I know it seems kind of like, I have to sit down and write like, okay, from 8 to 8:30, I want this to happen, and from 8:30 to 9, I want this to happen. And then let me tell you, I did do all the things. And then, interestingly, that typically they don't go with the plan.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
But then if you have a plan, it's very easy to just say, now I'm just going to move this up, move this down. And then since I don't have this much time, I'm going to eliminate this complex topic. Right. So none of the plan really stick like minute by minute to the plan. But if you have a very detailed plan, you just like, now things don't go according to plan. And then you still have a lot of things on your plan that you can like juggle.
For sure. Yeah. We want to make sure you go in prepared though, Definitely. Don't go in winging it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. When I just started, I don't think I on-site guide that much.
For sure.
But nowadays, I potential would.
Yeah.
And great. All right.
Cool. Yeah,
Whew.
I mean, we didn't talk about venue too much, but that's a part of this whole thing too. Right. It's like, how does your venue serve you?
Oh, yeah, the Formulate thing. I guess we should put this in this note. So, I actually give out practice for my SPI student.
Yeah.
I mean, I would just say, during the course, I probably can only teach you how to formulate your plan. So I usually, the first day, I just say, okay, who are your students? How many you want to take? Do you have any prerequisites? And then what is your ideal crack.
Yeah.
And I should say, don't worry that you might not find your ideal crack yet. But I want you to think about what you want for your ideal crack.
Yeah. I think the whole structure and visualize the day to actually meet your course goals, it can stand alone.
Right.
But it's most effective when it is built around a venue. So it's okay to like build this plan out, right? And then just consider adapting it to the specific venue that you have. Or if you have a specific venue in mind that you think will work, then you can start to just build the day around it as well.
And totally. But I think this thing can they can work on this together, at the same time.
Yeah.
So I like this question about like, okay, what is your ideal crack, right? So for example, with say beginner group if I'm gym climbing, I'm not gonna do like a 2-hour approach, right? So just like, okay, I want like relatively easy approach, not too long, right? Has like variety of clients at a different level, right? Relatively easy to set up. Maybe not too long of the client. And then, so then when you have all these criteria, then now you look at your guidebook. You're not just like flipping from the page 1 to the page whatever. And it's like, is this good? Maybe this is good. So you can quickly sift through the potential crack. Just like, but you're probably not going to find your ideal crack.
No,
but then I feel that when you think about your ideal crack, you're like, oh, this is like close enough, and I just need to make some modification, maybe into my course plan or whatever.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Formulate.
It's a lot, but we do think about that, and like right now, like both Spencer and I, we were talking about, we are still designing new courses. Like we are trying to formulate mentorship course.
For sure.
And we are still in the formulate phase right now. Just let us be honest with you.
Yeah.
But we're pretty confident that we will have a good product.
Yeah, I mean, and this is I think what we both do. So it's born out of like our own experience and trial and error. But we're open to feedback. So, folks have ideas, let us know. And if you actually think you're interested in working on some of these concepts with us, then that's kind of what we're hoping to go. Yeah.
And then right now, I feel after like teaching climbing for so long, and now I feel like I'm pretty confident. I'll tell you, I actually teach really well.
Yeah.
And Spencer too.
Yeah.
So we certainly have some experience to share.
For sure.
Cool. All right.
Okay.
This episode, wow, right now it's already at the 50-minute mark.
Okay.
So in next episode, we will talk about implement.
Yeah.
So keep following us,
Look
and
out
then
for
we'll
that.
see you in next episode.
Cool.